property can be one of those things that is super exciting, but don't let the online gurus fool you because they're just trying to sell a course 9 times out of 10. Today, we're going to be talking about the renter's right bill and some ways that you can get on the property ladder. But first, let's get into this with some of the information that you might need to know before you start investing. Yeah, so it's true. Investing in property is one of those things that can be super rewarding, but it's not easy. This is why you want to make sure that you surround yourself with the right people. Today, I'm not only going to go through the renter's right bill, but I'll also be talking about some mortgage related products and some mortgage related information that you will need to know if you're planning on investing in property. As always, don't forget financial literacy is super important. So you want to make sure that you have the information that you need to be able to make informed choices. Make sure you check out my new book, A Mortgage is a Really Big Loan. But don't think it's just about mortgages. It's also about just general financial literacy. So make sure you check it out. The QR code is right there. A few questions. What is the renter's right bill? How does it impact renters? And how does it impact landlords? So let's get into this. First and foremost, the UK Renters' Right Bill. This impacts landlords and it also is going to impact the renters. So it's important that you understand what this bill is all about. The impact on renters, let's just start with that. So the first thing that you're going to notice is that there are no fault evictions have been abolished. So landlords can no longer evict tenants without a valid reason. You gain greater stability and security in your home because of this act. And so for people who may feel that up until now they haven't really been able to plan their lives because they've been worried about, if they're going to get kicked out of their apartment, this is going to give them a little bit more security. This will allow you to be able to plan your life a lot better. Next up, all tenancies become periodic. So fixed term tenancies will automatically become rolling contracts. That's good news. You can give 2 months notice at any time, offering the flexibility that you might need in your life. So if you are in a position where you've applied for a job somewhere and you get a job offer and you were worried that you were going to be locked in to some type of tenancy agreement, this is going to give you that type of flexibility and stability, especially considering that a lot of employers are going to require a 3-month notice period. And if someone's bringing you on board, realistically, a 3-month period is something that most people will be able to work with. So that's going to be something that's going to make people's lives a lot easier if you're a renter. Next up, annual rent increases only. So landlords can only raise rent once per year and must give 2 months notice. If you've been in a place where in the past your landlord has just arbitrarily just increased your rent, you know how frustrating that is. If you're trying to plan your budget, if you're trying to plan your life, and then all of a sudden your rent goes up, that's not good news. So this new bill is going to give you a lot more stability, as I keep saying. It's going to allow you to be able to budget a lot better. So make sure that as we progress and as this bill goes through Parliament, you keep up to track with this. And you can also challenge unfair increases through a tribunal. Next up, the legal right to pets and fair treatment. For you dog and cat lovers out there, this is going to be very welcome. So people can't just say no, you can't have pets. and they cannot discriminate against you if you have children. Now, this is a double-edged sword because if you're a landlord, which we'll be getting into shortly, quite often both children and pets can ruin property. So, as the landlord, as the person with the vested interest, it may seem a little bit unfair. But as a tenant, if you found it difficult to find somewhere to rent because you have children or because you're a pet lover, this is going to give you a few more rights and hopefully give you more options. Let's go into the impact on landlords. So there's going to be stricter eviction grounds. So Section 8 is expanding. So evictions must be based on specific legal grounds, such as selling the property or tenant misconduct. Now, obviously, there's going to be people as landlords that might try to abuse that and just say, oh, we're selling. There are guidelines around the notice period that you'd have to give someone and how long if you've moved someone out saying that you're selling and then you don't sell, there are going to be guidelines on how long it would be before you'd be able to rent out again. So don't try to abuse the system. Make sure you understand the system. And I know that 90% of the landlords that I deal with are honest, hardworking people. They're not property moguls. They're just people that use property as their pension. So they want to provide a nice property, a nice place for people to live. So they're not looking to just get rid of people just for the sake of getting rid of people. This means that there will be a little bit more paperwork, or in some cases, a lot more paperwork if you do have grounds to evict someone and you want to evict them. Mandatory registration. So now landlords must register themselves and their properties in a national online database. Now, if you're like me, you would probably say that the government is not good at most things. Most things that involve the government and government websites and government databases aren't usually that efficient. Let's just hope that this time around they're able to put something in place that is user friendly, something that is fit for purpose, something that someone who doesn't have a PhD in how to fill out documents or how to fill out forms, they'll be able to use it. Because quite often, these portals and the things that the government does produce, it's not made or produced, or it doesn't seem like they consult end users, so they can often be quite difficult to use. But let's hope that that's not the case. So, as I said, this is going to add administrative responsibility and make it more transparent so you'll know who landlords are. And I believe there's going to be something in there as far as the properties and how the landlords have managed tenants in the past. There will be minimum property standards. Now, I'm not one who believes that most landlords are slumlords. So I don't think that most landlords are slumlords. I do think that most landlords want to make sure that A, they have a nice property because it is their pension and it is their investment. They want to make sure that the people living there are taking care of the property. So they're going to do their best to provide a nice place for people to live, but there will be minimum property standards as set forth by the government. So this may require upgrades to meet health and safety criteria. So this is things like damp, mold, and heating. So this can place an additional strain on landlords who already are finding it quite difficult, because when it comes to the mortgage market, the lenders are making it a lot more difficult with stress testing for landlords to be able to find suitable mortgages that they'll be able to make a profit. So with all of this regulation and legislation, it will make it more difficult. This is why it's important that if you are a landlord and you're looking to get a mortgage, that you speak to the right person. It's also vital that if you are someone that's considering investing in property, that you have the right team. I go online and I spend a lot of time on social media, and probably every fifth ad, because of the algorithms and the cookies in my system, every fifth ad seems to be talking about how to make money in property. So there's a lot of people out there, and some of them are legit. Some of them provide a fantastic service and great courses. But even with that, not everyone's going to be able to give you the best advice when it comes to getting a mortgage for your investment property. So what I want to do today is explain a few things about the right type of mortgage to get if you are considering investing in property. But before I do that, I do need to talk about one last thing when it comes to the impact on landlords, and it's going to be the new ombudsman um, and a stronger tenants' right system. So a new ombudsman will handle tenant complaints. Tenants will have more avenues to challenge landlords, increasing scrutiny and accountability. Most of that burden is, unfortunately, going to be on the landlord. This is one of the things that I've heard a lot of landlords complain about. It seems like everything is structured against them, giving tenants way more rights than in some cases tenants deserve. Because as much as we can talk about the theory of rogue landlords, you do have some tenants that are absolutely horrible. Now it's time to move into a few questions around getting a mortgage for an investment property. So, question: what is a buy to let mortgage? I get asked this a lot. Is an interest only mortgage a good idea? And do I need a special mortgage for investing? There's lots of questions that I get around buy to let mortgages, interest only mortgages, and the different type of mortgages that are available for property investing. So first, we're going to look at the different types of mortgages. We'll look at the interest only mortgage, and I'll answer a few questions around both of those topics. So, buy to let versus residential mortgage. So, most people, if they're purchasing a home to live in, they're going to get a residential mortgage. If they get a residential mortgage, 9 times out of 10, it will be a repayment mortgage. A buy to let mortgage is going to be a little bit different. Now, what you will find is with a buy to let mortgage, the criteria is more based on the property than on the individual. So what I mean by that, in some cases, if you're getting a buy-to-let mortgage for a investment property, it will mean that you may not even need to prove your income because the mortgage is based on the property. So as long as the property is able to produce enough to pay the mortgage plus the stress testing, it would be something that some lenders would consider. The downside is quite often you're going to need at least a 25% deposit. With most things mortgage related, there are going to be nuances. So when I say these figures or these percentages, they're not 100%, 100% of the time. But if you have that 25% figure in mind going into a transaction, you're probably going to be in a safer place than not having a 25% deposit. The use of the property, one of the things that hangs a lot of people up, and I find that this has caused problems with people that haven't considered this or done this the right way, is if you're going to have a family member living in the buy-to-let property. Now, obviously, you want to make sure that you're always open and honest with the lender. So one of the questions on the application will be, do you intend on having a friend or family member living in the property? If that's the case, you might struggle to find a mortgage because a lot of lenders don't like that scenario when someone's going to have a family member living in the property. And it's quite obvious why. I mean, if you have a regular tenant, even with the new reforms that are coming through, and they don't pay their rent or they're doing something that you're not happy with, it's easier to follow the process and get them out. But if it's your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, then it's going to be a struggle. So if they stop paying the rent, the lender feels, based on that, that it might put you in a situation where you're unable to make the monthly payments. That's not to say that no lenders will ever consider that, but you will find it a little bit more difficult getting a mortgage if you intend on having a friend or family member living in the property. I ask or I get asked a lot about buying through a limited company or an SPV. I am not here to give legal advice, and I'm certainly not here to give tax advice. So, this is a question that you'd want to speak to an accountant about. Buying through a limited company or an SPV could be the right thing depending on your property strategy. But what you don't want to do is just see a post on the internet about how that's the best thing to do and then you jump in and do it. Make sure that you speak to an accountant and also think about the impact on the types of mortgages that you'll be able to get. Some lenders won't lend through a limited company or SPV, but most will. So just keep in mind, if you're buying through a limited company or an SPV, understand why you're doing that. Talk to an accountant about your long-term goals that they can advise you on what the best way of moving forward is. Interest only versus repayment. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. So you have interest only mortgages and you have repayment mortgages. So an interest only mortgage is essentially what it says. It's a mortgage that you take out that each month that you make your mortgage payment, the amount that you owe or your principal remains the same. The balance doesn't go down. So you might wonder, well, why would somebody want to take out an interest only mortgage? Well, if you're taking out a mortgage on a buy to let property and it's an investment property, the interest only mortgage will make the monthly payments lower because you're only paying back the interest, which means when you rent it out, it gives you more bandwidth on how much you can rent it out for and still make a profit. The problem with an interest only mortgage, if you haven't thought it through, is at the end of the term, you owe that full amount. So the lender's going to want to know how you're going to pay that off. Most people who are buying a buy to let property tend to take out an interest only mortgage because it just makes more sense. They'll be able to make a profit on the rent, plus the property will appreciate or grow in value. That way, at the end of the term, if they do choose to sell the property, they can sell it. They'll make a profit because the property has appreciated or gone up in value. Plus, they've made a profit on the property each month if they've priced it correctly. You have to think about the criteria though. So if you are trying to get a residential mortgage on interest only, which you can do, it does exist, but it's a little bit harder. If you're taking out an interest only mortgage, you should think about your age, even if it's an investment property, keeping in mind that at the end of that term, if you're unable to get a remortgage, you're going to have to sell that property. And think about the repayment vehicle. In most cases, the repayment vehicle is sale of property. So when you speak to your mortgage broker and he's doing the application, he will ask you what is the exit strategy. So what are you going to do when that mortgage comes fully due at the end of the term? The right mortgage type. One of the things that you're going to need to think about and talk to your broker about is the right mortgage type. A little bit earlier, I mentioned the SPV and limited company. I got a note there about SIC codes or SIC codes. When you're setting up your limited company or SPV, you will need to talk to your accountant, as I said, and make sure that you have the right SIC codes because lenders will look at those codes. So some lenders will not lend to a limited company that does not have a property related SIC code. So when you're setting up the business, you'll need to make sure that you have the right SIC code. Some will. As with everything that I keep saying, there are going to be nuances, but it is something that if you're not aware, you wouldn't know to put the right SIC code, which then when you go to get a mortgage might cause a problem for you. The next thing to consider, what are you using the property for? Are you going to be using it for supported living, as an HMO? Is it going to be a single family dwelling? All of these things are going to make a difference as far as the type of mortgage that you get on the property. And the last thing that you want to do is take out the wrong type of mortgage. Because if you take out the wrong type of mortgage, it could void the contract and you could put yourself in a very, very bad situation. So if you're thinking about investing in property, yes, it could be a great idea and it could be something that in the long run pays off, but there's going to be some planning that you have to do. And you're going to want to make sure that you surround yourself with the type of people that can give you the information, guidance, and support that you need in order to be successful. You don't want to end up losing a lot of money. And you also don't want to forget about the additional costs. If you're purchasing a buy to let property and it's going to be a second property, then you know there'll be the additional stamp duty. So you want to make sure that when you're budgeting that 25% for the deposit, the broker's fees, if you're going to be doing any refurb, make sure that you're thinking and calculating the stamp duty in your calculation, that you don't get to a part of the process and then you realize that you don't have enough money. Think about the solicitor fees, depending on the property, if it's leasehold or freehold, that will impact how much of the solicitor charges you for the transaction. Think about the product fees. So the product fees are what the lender is going to charge you for that particular mortgage. You will find that the lower the interest rate, the higher the product fee. The lower the product fee, the higher the interest rate. And what I mean by that is when I'm going through the options of mortgages with my clients, the first question people will ask me is, get me the lowest interest rate. And quite often, as I'm scrolling through the hundreds, if not thousands of options, one of the things that will pop up is the product fee. So some product fee will be a percentage of the mortgage. Others will be a flat fee. There'll be product fees that could be 10, 15, 20,000 pounds, depending on the property price. And who wants to pay 20,000 pounds upfront to get a mortgage? Now, some people do, because that will mean that in most cases you're going to get a lower interest rate. But if people are looking at cash flow and if people are in an area where they have a lot of elasticity as far as how much they can charge for rent, then most people are going to want a lower product fee. They may add the product fee to the mortgage. So that's another thing to consider. So they'll do the mortgage, the product fee might be 3, 4, 5,000 pounds, and they can actually add that to the mortgage, so they're not paying that out of pocket. They have that money to do any refurb or any other things that they might want to do. But don't forget to think about the product fee, broker fee, solicitor fee, stamp duty, etc., because these things are important. Now let's talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, something that I'm very passionate about, something that I talk about a lot. And then we have a whole chapter in my book about estate planning. Where is your information? So if you have a property portfolio, where do you keep that information? Do the people in your life, the important people, your wife, your husband, your children, do they know where that information is? Whose name is on the deed and who knows what? So, where is the information? I have had to deal with lots of instances where someone has had multiple properties, sometimes properties that family members didn't even know about. When I was a bank manager, one of the most stressful things that I would have to deal with is registering a bereavement. So someone has passed away, a wife, a husband, a child has come to the bank and is notifying us that the person has passed away. And what inevitably happens as things start to unfold is this person has properties, but nobody knew how many properties the person had. And it just creates a really rocky situation for those that are left behind, because it can cause a lot of stress, but it can also cause a lot of arguments within the family, because all of a sudden we realize that there's all these properties out there. Now, if they're free and clear and they don't have a mortgage on it, they're fine. But what if they all have interest only mortgages and there's not that much difference between the property value and the amount that is owed? It can be an absolute nightmare. So as you're building your property portfolio, make sure that you're speaking to the people in your life that will have to come behind you when you pass away, and the people that will benefit from that. So make sure you have the conversation. I would always recommend having a portfolio spreadsheet that will have the property address, the interest rate, who the lender is, the account number, and keep that in a place where the relevant and the right people have access to that. So don't just build this property portfolio, do it the wrong way, and then also leave a mess for somebody else to clean up. Whose name is on the deed, that kind of ties into it. Make sure that you're planning your estate. Make sure you're planning that when you do leave this earth, everything is decent and in order. Make sure that you talk about trusts. So speak to an estate planner. They can talk to you about trust. They can talk to you about ways of being tax efficient, and that the surviving spouse or whatever does not have to pay unnecessary inheritance taxes, etc. And who knows what? I talk about this frequently. So if you watch my videos, if you've ever seen me speak at an event, or if you've read my book, I say you must make sure that everybody knows what everybody knows. I'll explain that. A few weeks ago now, I've updated some of my estate planning. And what I did is I put together an email with an overview of what I want done with different things that I have. Don't have millions, don't have tons of properties, but for the things that I do have, my insurance policies, etc., I've given an overview of who it's for, not necessarily the amounts, because that might not be the important thing, but making sure that my daughter knows that there's an insurance policy for her. My wife knows that there's an insurance policy to pay off mortgages. My brothers and my sisters and my mom, and everybody knows what everybody knows. And I sent that as an email to the relevant people, even some friends, because I have friends all over the world, and there's some people that I would definitely want, if they're able to and if they want to come and celebrate my life. And it might sound morbid, but it's one of those things that it's important to do. So I've sent that out to everybody so that in my passing, it's not like my daughter will say, well, my daddy said this, and my wife will say this, and my mom will say that. And everybody knows that everybody else knows, because they've seen everybody else has been included in that. So with your estate planning, make sure that when you're taking out a mortgage or buying a property, that you update that information. When you have children, or if you have or adopt, make sure you update that information. And then that's the time to send the update out to everybody, because frequently I do find that people with best intention do a will, and then they just let life continue. They get married, they have kids, they buy property, they sell property, and that will has never been updated, or people don't know when the will was last updated. So make sure that you have estate planning in mind. Make sure that you're thinking about the people that will be left behind, and just make sure that you realize that none of us are going to live forever. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I've been in finance for over 30 years. The benefit of that knowledge and that information has been poured into my book, A Mortgage is a Really Big Loan. It's a great gift for young people, for people in your life, or even maybe someone that has recently moved to the UK. But there's something in it for everybody, because I talk about basic financial literacy. It's available on Amazon. Make sure you check it out. Every first and second Wednesday of the month, we do this podcast and we talk about different things to do with financial literacy. If there's something you'd like for me to talk about or someone you'd like me to interview in a certain skill set or certain aspect of property, make sure that you put that in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. If there's anything in here that you think that I've said wrong, then make sure you put that in too. I'm a lifelong learner and I would appreciate that type of input. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and tell a friend about our property talks.